Welcome, everyone. My name is Stephen Goldberg of Optimus Performance, bringing you practical tips on leadership, team development, and employee performance in the workplace. And as you can see, I have a special guest expert with me today, Karen Groves. Say hi, Karen.
Hey, everybody. Hello.
Did I get your last name right?
You did. Yes. It looks scary, but it's just normal old gross.
So, known as the Monday Videos Lady for her energetic welcome to the week, Karen is a five-time author, both an award-winning and TEDx speaker, founder of Canvas Creek Team Building, and recipient of the Montana Governor's Award for Volunteerism. Her mission is to inspire others to be their best, to try the next thing, and to know they are worth every effort it takes to live their life, to live their next. Sorry about that. So I won't go on. I think that's a good intro
That's
in
a
a
lot.
nutshell. And being an expert on leadership and teamwork, team development, we're going to focus on that in today's interview. And of course, leadership and teamwork is required more than ever in businesses and organizations, and in the world in general. So I'm happy to hear what you have to say. And we're going to talk about your latest book as well, Quiet Leadership, which I did start to read while I was traveling because I just got back. I didn't have a chance to go through it all, so you'll bring me and the audience up to date. So, first question then is, you bring solutions to improve leadership and teamwork in organizations. Um, Tell us about what you're seeing today in the workplace when it comes to being effective at leadership and thus driving also teamwork. What do you see? How do you assess the current situation from your perspective, being an expert in that field?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a big question, right?
Yeah.
Leadership has changed so much. We used to, have dogma that we could follow and have a vision and go in direction and everything was just fine. But today, what I see over and over is for somebody to be truly engaged, they have to have ownership in all projects and all processes, probably more than ever before. And they're looking for more flexibility than ever before. So leaders have to really put their ego aside and they have to be willing to try things in a new way with people and to be open more than ever to the idea that I'm not always the smartest person in the room, that there's somebody else in the room who has a bigger, better idea. And that new style of leadership is just so collaborative that it's both scary and invigorating, depending on what your mindset is.
Okay. So when you talk about a new style of leadership, can you describe what that is?
Yeah, so I wrote the book Quiet Leadership during the pandemic because we were yelling at one another, and uh, Thanksgiving dinner was not a comfortable place to be for people because our leadership style just kind of broke apart there. Old style leaders didn't really know what to do, and the new style leaders didn't know what to do. And I was watching this, and one night during the news, I was like, you know what we need right now is some quiet leadership. And in my mind, quiet leadership does a couple of things. Quiet leadership is not about a dogmatic set of rules. It's about knowing that what naturally makes you a leader, those instincts that are just inborn in you, as well as the lessons that you learned from your dad and you learned from your dog and you learned from your grandchild, those lessons are what make you a really good leader. So I think there are three really big things that we have to think about now as leaders. The first one is that you have to ask more than you tell. I tell the story in the book about asking three questions before you make a statement. You also have to act more than you direct. And by that, I mean, our our people now want us shoulder to shoulder with them in the trenches doing the work. If we're digging ditches, we're all digging ditches. That is more important than ever before. And finally, celebrating more than you correct. We have raised a couple of generations that were just constantly fed praise and celebration. And we have got to find a way to do that in the workplace and know that you have to celebrate very carefully. You have to celebrate what you want to see repeated, not what you wish they would quit doing, which leaders often do.
Hmm. So how do you see this? So there's two styles of leadership, obviously. One is to be more of a listener, more of an engager, and the other one is more directive. So, it goes from the classic autocratic style leader to a more, what I like to call participative type of leader, to foster that expression and also teamwork from people. So what are the problems caused in businesses and organizations? Because you worked with all size of companies. You mentioned in your bio, you worked from companies large as Walmart to small local companies. What do you see as the problem when uh, this old style of leadership, more leaning towards the autocratic, is manifesting itself in companies today? How does that create a problem for the organization?
Yeah, it's the autocratic leaders, I think, become incredibly frustrated. And because they're having to think all of the time of how can they just, say, this is where we're going, put the wheels on the rail and let's go this direction. And so they're frustrated with that. And so a lot of times our leaders are becoming ineffective and they're stepping out of their roles sooner than is maybe good for the organization just because they haven't quite figured that out. The idea of being autocratic is sometimes comfortable to people, but when your team is not listening and your team is not getting on the rails and going forward, you have to step back and figure out a new way to do things. And so we lose people, and the rate of burnout, I think, goes much, much higher when we have that only lead from an autocratic style.
So you're seeing more turnover and more burnout with those leaders that are typically using an autocratic style of leadership, which for many leaders is often, the take charge approach, and which may have gotten them to move up the ladder in the company
Right?
because they're not afraid to take charge or express themselves. But in today's world, employees or team members are looking for a more coaching, participative style of leadership. So, how do you see that employees, the effect on employees and team members? How do they react to this type of leadership, and how does it affect their performance and productivity?
Yeah, I think that it has a profound effect on it. I think autocratic style often leads to, again, as you say, it's very directive. It also leads to a lot of thinking time. I need to think about this. I need to run it up the flagpole, and our people now want to move faster. We are in an age where we can get information, just pull it out of your pocket, and there's all the information you need to make a decision. And so they want leaders who can think fast, they want leaders who can move fast, and they want leaders who are flexible. And if they don't have that, it's pretty easy to go find it someplace else because you know what the job market is like. Everybody is looking for good employees. And if I'm not finding the type of leadership I need with you, and I'm not so incredibly invested in the mission that we're building together, which again is really key. If I'm not invested in that mission we're building together, I'm going to go find a new leader, somebody who I can be invested with.
Mhm. Did you find that like certain leaders have a lot more difficulty based on their personality to shift from, being more directive to more of a listener, more participative?
Yeah, I think Adam Grant does a great job talking about this in Think Again, which Think Again talks about how there are four personality styles. There's a politician, there's a preacher, there is a prosecutor, and there is a scientist. And the scientist is always willing to say, well, what if I'm wrong? And what if we try this? And maybe we go here. That type of leadership is rewarding both to the leader and to your people, but if you're a style that is preacher driven or prosecutor driven, there's only one way to do things. And it's very hard to change your mind if you have always been right. You always want to be right. And you're not willing to say, "Oh, maybe that color blue isn't truly blue, maybe it's teal." It takes a scientific mindset to look at that.
Interesting you mentioned Adam Grant because I was listening to a podcast interview yesterday with him on Trevor Noah's podcast. I don't know if you
Mm.
listened to him at all, but there was an interesting conversation. He expressed himself very well. So tell me about your process of leadership transformation. I guess you could refer to your book, The Quiet Leader. Um, how do you help that leader move towards becoming more inquisitive, more of a listener, more engaging people in the conversation about, uh, you know, moving in a certain direction, let's say?
Yeah, I love to do it with our team building process. So, the team building process that I developed is collaborative art. And there are very few leaders who think that they're artists. And some of your employees do. It kind of depends on what field you're in. Employees are like, oh, yes, I'm really creative, or I'm not. But we choose art because almost everybody feels inadequate. And so there's a level playing field. I don't feel like I can do this process. You don't feel like you can do this process, but if we work together, maybe we can figure it out. And so I run a team. It's through a process. It takes about 2.5 hours. And the leader paints right beside the receptionist. We put people on canvases together. There's four people on a canvas, and we put them together at random. And the leader um, they have to be equal with their people, probably for the first time ever. We are truly equals here. We don't know what we're doing. We don't know how we're going to do it. We don't know how long it'll take. We have no crazy idea what it's going to be like in the end, but we're going to figure it out together. So we go through three stages: begin, which is, I don't know how to start, but I'll start anyway. Become, which is, oh my gosh, what if we worked together on this process? And then believe is when you get to the end, and the art, no matter how beautiful or how ugly it is, you're so proud of it and you're so proud of the team that you've worked with, that you now have an open mind to listening to everybody on the team and understanding that Stephen's little gray swish right at the end was just as important as Karen's big green tree in the beginning. So the process levels the playing field, but it very quickly gives them something to be proud of together. And when they're in that moment, if we can be proud of this together, we can create change and have big conversations about leadership.
Hmm. So I see some artwork behind you.
Yeah, there's a
Um,
lot of sun in here, but
so are these works of art that come out of your workshops or?
yes, generally the teams keep art because the really cool thing is that the art is then a reminder for years of what they learned when they were together and what they agreed to when they were together. I've even had people who have said, I've outlasted three bosses because my art is still on the wall and I love the art and I don't want to leave work. So they get so invested in this. So yes, so that's art that teams have created together.
So that's like a learning experience. I love it because it's really hands-on. And I guess you debrief after with them to get them to express what they've learned from that. How does that get carried forward into the day-to-day work, into the day-to-day operations?
Yeah, a great question. So, the secret to our process is that there are roles for everybody on the canvas, but there's no communication or no verbal communication. They create the artwork in silence. And so, the first time the team gets to talk is when we're in the debriefing phase and we talk about what was it like to try to do this work in silence? And how did you learn to communicate with one another? And how did you know what one another wanted? And how did you feel about change? In the middle of the process, we often insert change. So the team goes through a big debriefing process from 30 to 60 minutes. And the big question is, how do we transfer this to work? How does this look like we're normally doing or what we're doing at work? And how can this help us improve what we're doing at work? And generally, it's improve communication, improve listening to one another, and think about collaboration in a whole new way.
Mhm. So the listening part is interesting because uh, in your quiet leadership approach, you talk about uh, listening before speaking, like asking three questions. And then you also talked about celebrating. So, that's typically okay, so you have an experience with that in a workshop working together with somebody where you can't speak, but you're creating together. So it's kind of like a wow moment, I would imagine, or an aha moment, and then you debrief. So how do you get the leader to, because, learning to ask questions more than telling, learning to give recognition is really something that doesn't cost the leader or the manager anything in terms of, uh, you know, output financially. It's really just taking the time and being cognitive to do that. But that happens over time. How do you go from that learning experience to having them build a habit to do those types of actions, listening and recognizing? Because that's really, I think, the hard part is to make that shift on a day-to-day basis.
Right? Because as you say, there's no monetary value to it. I can't say, oh, it cost me $20 to do that recognition if it's a verbal recognition. But there is a cost, an ego cost to asking questions and to celebrating people. I have to put you above me. I have to put you ahead of me. And instead of coming into the situation and saying, Stephen, if you would just start your podcast with these three words, everything would go great. And I know it would because I'm the leader. You're not listening to that because I'm pointing at you and telling you the solution. But if I said, are there other ways you've thought of starting your podcast? You said, I thought about doing this. I thought about doing this. And then we can have a conversation because I asked the question. And we may get to, you're going to use my three words, but you thought of it yourself. And so as the leader, I have to give up my ego and I have to be willing to give up time. And the time is probably one of the hardest things for us to give up because we're running so fast. But the other chapter, I don't know if you've gotten to the chapter yet called As If Their Life Depended on It. In that chapter, I talk about how you have to look your people in the eye and say, how are you today? What are you thinking today? And how can I help you? How can I build you up today? And when you're willing to do that as a leader, to set your ego aside and really look people in the eye, you'll get to better results. But I can't go into an organization and say, all right, here's the rules. From now on, we're going to ask three questions before we make a statement. It's much better to put them in the middle of this really cool collaborative art process. And at the end of it, say, what could we do different about asking questions and have a conversation around it? And so that's where the change starts. The change starts, pardon me, is a conversation after the process when they've seen that it works.
So focus more on the person first, not what needs to change, and giving them a voice rather than telling them what should be different or in the.
Yeah, absolutely. The story in the book is that I was coaching somebody and I said, you need to do A, B, and C. And she didn't hear me. And at the end of
Right.
the call, I said, she's not even listening. And my dad said, now, Karen, that's kind of a brave statement. And he said, people don't listen unless asked to be told. And so I called her back and said, hey, can I ask you a couple questions? I asked her questions and then I told her A, B, and C. And she listened because she had asked at that time. So she knew that I was invested and I knew she was invested.
It reminds me of an article I also read, I think yesterday, about a hockey player who was traded to a new team, Washington Senators. No, Washington, I forget what their name is, but the fellow was from here in Quebec, where I live, and he was like supposed to be a huge star, but the previous teams he played for didn't pan out. So he's traded to Washington. And he was saying that the first interview he had with the coach was the the most different interview because it was a 15-minute meeting, and for 10 minutes, all the coach talked about was asking him about him and how he was feeling about moving, how his family was feeling. It was all about him as a human, not about hockey. And he found that to be a tremendous boost to his, um, motivation to want to, because there's a lot of stress when you move your whole family from one city to another. And of course, hockey is a lot of uncertainty. How are you going to perform? And I thought of this from a leadership perspective and how important it is to treat people, not just as a commodity that you have there to output some tasks and try and gain from them.
That's such a beautiful story. And we know that young hockey player is going to work his tail off for this coach because he asked about him, right? He believes in him. In my new book, I have a book that will be out hopefully later this month. It's Begin, Become, Believe, a leadership journey for teenagers. I have 30 people who are telling their stories of leadership. And every single one, not every single one, but most of them tell a story just like that. The leader who influenced me cared about me, asked about me, gave me direction that mattered to me. And though that's the leadership that people are looking for now, is exactly what that coach did.
Yeah. So let's just recap again, because I think I got it, that there's three components to the quiet leader or leadership. Did I get that right? That there's three major um, parts
Yes.
to it?
Yeah. Yep. I didn't want it to only boil down to three, but it really does. And it's
Yeah.
ask more than you tell, act more than you direct, and celebrate more than you correct.
So repeat those once more, sorry.
Ask more than you tell. So I'm going to ask questions instead of just launching into the solution. Act more than you direct. So I'm going to show you how I want you to behave. I'm going to stand shoulder to shoulder with you. And celebrate more than you correct is celebrating every time they do something right so that you don't have to celebrate when they do something wrong.
Yeah, I think I like to use the example of a bank account, uh, from an emotional perspective of the employee. When you take money out of your bank, you're not that happy about it because your savings are going down. But when you make deposits, you feel good because you feel more secure, you have money in the bank. And it's kind of like that with giving, getting recognition and getting feedback. You need a balance between the two to feel secure and to feel valued in your job.
Yeah, exactly right.
Mm. So your team development workshop, using the art approach, I find very interesting. Now, so this is a service that you bring to companies. Do you offer this in the United States? Do you to any region? What's your market for this type of thing?
Great question. Yeah, so I will go any place that I can take a suitcase. It is we call it a mobile art studio. I put tarps on the floor and plastic on the walls and cover the tables, and we never have left a paint stain anywhere. We've worked with over 80,000 people.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so I'll go any place that a team goes. And I work with teams up to 100 people. I've done over 100, but it's not as effective. Then it's just fun. Yeah, so I'll go any place the team wants me to go. I also train people how to do what I do, which is very fun.
So if a company wanted to, how long does a workshop take? I think you had meant it varies, right? But explain that.
Yeah, it varies, but usually, so we can paint and just have fun in an hour, but we want a minimal of conversation and some impact is 2.5 hours, 4 hours if you want to do some good goal setting around it. And then I love to turn the team over to somebody like you who's been watching, and you're going to do long-term coaching with them around leadership development. I love to work in situations like that.
Okay. So there should be some follow-up or coaching after to
Sure.
help the leader to make that transformation, because it is kind of a transformation, right? In
It
style.
absolutely is. Yeah, it absolutely is.
Yeah.
It can be if the
Yeah.
leader is growth minded.
Yeah. Well, that's the goal, I guess, is to you want to get some permanent change or improvement. You need to adjust your style. We can't change who we are, but through understanding how to shift our style, we can make those changes and improvements. And then people, when they see that, they're more inclined to want to follow the leader too, because they see that they're making an effort to be more inclusive and be a better leader, I guess is really what it boils down to.
Yeah, people like to see people trying. It's human
Yeah.
nature that even if you're my leader, if I know you're trying really hard to improve or trying really hard to do things in a different way, I'm going to root for you and I'm going to be right there to support you.
So can a company do this on their own, or do they need like a workshop leader?
Yeah, they need to have a workshop leader. I've had a couple of companies who've tried it on their own, and there are things that we do. We influence the speed that the team is developing with music, with the paintbrushes that are in the room, with different actions that we take. So the idea of creating something together is fine, but if you want to have impact, you need to have somebody who is directing it and make sure you have the right impact because we can have impact around change, we can have impact around communication, it can be around collaboration just based on ways we play the music in the room.
Do you have any like little stories or one story in particular where a company embarked on this and they achieved a specific outcome that they were seeking in the long term or medium to long term,
Mm.
a
Yes.
transformation?
Right, hundreds. On my website, they're called Stories from the Creek. But the one that popped into mind is kind of fun. It's rather an older one, but it's still cool. I was working with a Hilton Garden Inn here in Billings, and they went through the process together, and we did really good goal setting and some strategic planning together. And in the middle of it, the boss said, "What if we tried to be number one in the world for customer satisfaction?" And everybody, their head kind of hit the wall, like, "Oh my gosh." Because our Hilton Garden Inn is right beside a Costco and there's no beautiful, ocean view outside of it. But this team said, yeah, let's do it. And 7 months later, they were number one in the world. And not just one time, 7 times they were number one in the world for customer satisfaction because the team thought about things in a whole new way and they were in the mood to do big things. So that's one I love. I work with their team every single year because they're just such great people and we're always trying to move them forward.
So it is possible, those types of
Yes.
transformation.
Right? Yes, yes, yes. They went
How did
from,
that help them in their business, being number one in customer service, getting
oh
that?
my gosh, right? Everything happens when you're number one in customer service. You get more bookings, the clients, you come up first in all of the searches, your team gets recognition. I think that's probably the most important thing. The team gets recognition is we are number one. And then everybody wants to step up just a little bit to stay number one. So it was very transformative to them and very pride building. It was cool to watch them walk around with to be number one in the world in a chain that big was a big deal.
I was coaching somebody this morning who quit their job, leadership job, because of the culture of where they were working. And I'm helping them, kind of recycle, looking for what's the next thing in their career objectives. And it was very clear how the leader that they work for is so key. And so when you have a leader that uses the old style approach versus the new style, you also create turnover with your staff because
Mhm.
more and more people are, um, I guess I call it allergic to a control type environment. People are looking for more empowerment. And yeah, so it's really important for all aspects of the business, I would say, especially turnover. You can reduce that tremendously.
Right. Oh my gosh, I love the point that people are allergic to that old style
Yeah.
autocratic.
Well, I
That's
think
great.
more and more that's the case.
Mhm.
Um, so was there something I didn't ask you that I should have, a point that you'd like to share with the audience?
Gosh, I think you've done just a great job. I'll just touch this much on Monday videos. I do put out a
Okay.
1 minute video every Monday that just says, Welcome to the week. A lot of
Okay.
people share it with their teams, and we just look for the bright spot in the world because people need to look for the bright spot in the world. And so I'll send you a link to those if people are interested in getting on an email list.
That's great, because that was my next question. Do you have
Oh,
a something that you could provide to people for free that they could use to make the improvements or learn more about what you're saying? So a free video every Monday in your
yep,
inbox. That sounds
yep,
great. And you also have your books, Quiet Leadership, is it? The
yep.
Quiet
Quiet
Leader
leadership and what's next?
and
Yeah.
What's Next. And What's Next is not the new one that you're publishing. It's your older book. And what's your new one going to be about?
So we have taken our process into schools. We built a product for schools, and we work with leaders in schools. We
All
take
right.
them through the collaborative art process, and then we have them develop a leadership solution that improves the culture in the school. And we feel like if we teach kids how to do this now, they'll be better employees, among other things. But so the book is Begin, Become, Believe. And again, those 3 stages that we go through in Campus Creek, but it's how do you start being a leader? How do you become a leader? How do you get stronger? And how do you believe in yourself as a leader? And it's 30 leaders plus myself telling stories to students. And so far, the students that have read it are super excited. They want to read a physical book and touch leadership. Kids are excited about leadership.
Well, I think a lot of our problems in the world that we're trying to solve is a result of poor leadership. But I think that we all need to step up to be leaders because we actually are leaders in our lives with the people around us. And I think leadership is about becoming the best version of yourself. And that requires some self-knowledge, some personal observation, understanding, and taking responsibility for the things that you do and that you receive, how you react to things as well. And I think if everybody stepped up and worked on their own personal leadership and ability to take responsibility, we'd really be able to transform this world and not default to politicians and decision makers and think that they're the ones that are going to solve our problems. So I think promoting leadership, and especially amongst teenagers, is a really great idea. And I wish you the best of luck with that. And you'll let me know when that gets published, and then we'll share it
Thank you.
on the social media, LinkedIn, whatever. So that's great. So I'm going to put a link to your Monday video so people can sign up for that, and also to your book. So if people want that, They could check that out. And also, well, general contact information if somebody's interested in one of your workshops. Thank you again, Karen. I really appreciate this. I love your topics. I love your approach with the artwork. I do something similar with our leadership and teamwork workshops where it's very interactive and puts everybody on the equal playing field. But I love using art as a medium. It's fantastic. So thank you again, and let's stay in touch. For those new to the channel, I invite you to subscribe, turn on notifications to get news of new videos like these and my other videos. Thank you everyone again for listening, and we'll talk again soon.